Test, test. Testing 1, 2, 3. Test. Is it coming through? Okay. Test, test. 1, 2, 3. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Testing 1, 2, 3. Test, test.
Yes.
Okay. Just to let you know, once you finish talking, they're gonna go up and wipe the mic before Nella speaker.
Okay.
So just
Oh, good. Okay.
just prepare
Okay.
to step back, and then when the speaker comes up, to let them like if they start to jump in, just say wait a minute.
Okay. Okay. We're going to start in 2 minutes. So, can everybody get their seats, please? Good afternoon, and welcome to the 150th year commemoration of the Los Angeles Chinatown Massacre, a horrific event that took place not too far from where we stand here today at the El Pueblo de Los Angeles. Today's musical performance pays tribute to those who were brutally killed as racist propaganda, a segmented labor market, and political opportunism steeped in ideas of white supremacy spurred a movement that led to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and a trail of riots and murders up the Pacific coast and as far east as Rock Springs, Wyoming. We remember this not to dwell on the past, but to honor those whose lives were lost and to change the course of history towards one free of racial injustice and one where all people enjoy basic human rights. On behalf of my co-MC, Min Zhao, of the UCLA Asian Pacific Center, and myself from the Asian American Studies Center, we welcome you to today's tribute. This event will be followed by a panel of scholars this Friday about the massacre and what it means today. We have over 1,000 people registered to live stream into today's events, so thank you all of you who are tuning in remotely for joining us today. We also hope that you will enjoy the virtual events that are being sponsored this week by the Chinese American Museum. Before we introduce our speakers and performance, we'd like to acknowledge our co-sponsors, the Chinese American Museum, the UCLA, yay, the UCLA History Geography Project, and the Scripps College Music Department. We express our gratitude to Chancellor Jean Block and the Chancellor's Arts Initiative, who has made this program possible, as well as Helen and Morgan Chu Chair and Shirley and Walter Wang Chair and other endowments that have contributed to this program. And we thank our speakers who will be introduced shortly for standing up against the current wave of anti-Asian racism. We want to also thank members of the organizing committee as well as students of the UCLA Chinese Music Ensemble under the director of Professor Chi Li, who is also opening the performance, so you'll hear them once again. The production today has been directed by Professor Hao Huang, the endowed Bessie and Cecil Frankel Chair in Music at Scripps College, who produced the podcast Blood on Gold Mountain about the massacre and events surrounding it. Professor Huang will later introduce the performers, but first, let me hand the mic over to Professor Min Zhao, who will offer a few words in Cantonese before we begin with our opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. 大家下午好。今日我哋喺呢度以音樂劇嘅形式，緬懷1871年洛杉磯華人大屠殺嘅死難同胞。150年前喺我哋而家呢個地方發生咗針對華人嘅種族仇殺事件。喺10月24號嗰一日，500幾個白人暴徒衝入洛杉磯唐人街，大肆搶劫、大開殺戒，導致20名華人同胞遇難。呢個數字相當於當時洛杉磯華人總人口嘅1/10。呢次慘案之後，美國東西海岸發生多起針對華人同亞裔嘅仇殺事件。1882年國會通過排華法案，使種族歧視合法化，而且不斷向全國各地蔓延。前事不忘，後事之師。我哋今日嘅活動唔僅僅係針對呢次殘酷嘅歷史事件而發泄悲憤，我哋要通過紀念呢啲無辜嘅受害者，堅決不讓歷史重演，繼續為爭取種族平等、社會公義而奮鬥。今日嘅活動由 UCLA 亞太研究中心同亞太中心聯合主辦， 得到 UCLA 校長藝術基金同多方嘅贊助，支持單位仲有美華博物館、Scripps College 音樂系。今日嘅音樂節目主演係 Scripps College 音樂系血染金山音樂視頻嘅製作人黃浩教授嘅團隊。參加演出嘅仲有我哋 UCLA 李琦教授指揮嘅民樂團。我哋呢次紀念活動仲包括下個禮拜五中午嘅一場線上學術研討會，希望大家踴躍連線參加。我喺呢度向參與策劃同組織呢場演出嘅所有幕前幕後嘅工作人員表示衷心感謝，預祝演出成功。Thank you. Now it's my honor to introduce Chancellor Jean Bloch. As UCLA Chancellor since 2007, Professor Jean Bloch oversees the university's three-part mission on education, research, and service. He has defined academic excellence, civic engagement, and diversity as top priorities for his administration. He has championed important initiatives for greater racial equality, like rising to the challenge, addressing issues of Black life in the academy. We are also grateful for his support of our Asian and Pacific Islander communities. In particular, I thank his strong support and that of Vice Provost Cindy Fan for our Asia Pacific Center's Global Chinese Philanthropy Initiative. Please welcome Chancellor Bloch.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm honored to be here for this important event. And I'm grateful to be among such distinguished company. My thanks to Professor Karen Unamoto and Professor Min Zhao, as well as Congressman Judy Chu and Los Angeles City Council member Kevin De Leon, and Chair of the Chinese American Museum Board of Directors, Dr. Gay Yun, all of whom I'm proud to note have deep ties to UCLA. Thank you for being here. It is often said that mythology is how we'd like to see ourselves, but history is who we have been. Too often, the truth of history has to compete with the lure of mythology. The mythology of America tells us that we are a nation of immigrants happily coexisting in a democracy where all people are created equal. That might be the America of our aspirations. That is the America of our aspirations, but it's not the America of our history. While we rightly celebrate the contributions and great accomplishments of American communities, such as the Asian American community, we know that their stories of success live side by side with memories of struggle and at times of profound injustice. The Los Angeles Chinatown Massacre was a heartbreaking example of such injustice. The massacre was a horrifying combination of racial hatred and vigilante violence. Sadly, it was not the last example of anti-Asian hatred in our state and our country. What we should have learned from the massacre was that the horrors of racial animus were a threat to the success of our republic. Instead, racism continued to run wild and unchecked with terrible consequences. The massacre 150 years ago was followed by the Chinese Exclusion Act targeting Chinese immigration and the so-called Gentleman Agreement restricting immigration from Japan. It was followed by the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II and the outbreaks of anti-Asian harassment and violence that we've seen in recent years. It would be bad enough if these incidents were historical artifacts, but we know the names like Fred Korematsu were later joined by names like Vincent Chin. The cruel irony is that there is probably no ethnic group in American history that has not known the sting of prejudice, fear, and discrimination. And yet the reprehensible habits of scapegoating and mistreating others remains a shameful part of America. Universities like UCLA exist in part to preserve the historical record and to encourage an honest reckoning with the past and to provide spaces for thoughtful reflection on what the past means for the present and the future. Universities exist to say, we remember, and to help society say, we will do better. If we're to become a more perfect union that we dream of being, if we want our myths to become realities, every institution must commit to doing better, to honoring our values, to understanding our past, and to facing our failures, and in creating a future where compassion is our driving force and wisdom is our guiding light. I'm grateful and proud of UCLA's involvement in today's commemoration, and I look forward to working with all of you to create that future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chancellor Block. It is my honor to introduce Congresswoman Judy Chu, who is very familiar to many of us, not only as a congressional representative of the San Gabriel Valley area, but as a longtime leader and one of the few Asian American voices in Congress. She also helped to found the Asian American Studies Center at UCLA nearly 50 years ago, teaching the Asian American Women's class. As a role model, she inspired many of us to engage on the front lines of community and electoral politics. Please welcome the Honorable Judy Chu.
Today, we commemorate the 150th anniversary of one of the most horrific but least understood massacres in our country's history. While I have attended the commemoration of the Chinese American Museum of this event for a few years now, I want to thank Chancellor Jean Block and the Chancellor's Initiative on the Arts, the UCLA Asian American Studies Center, and the Asia Pacific Center for expanding our outreach to ensure that the nation recognizes the tragedy of the 1871 massacre, which we believe to be the largest mass lynching in our nation's history. It sends chills up my spine to think that all this happened 150 years ago, only a few feet away from here over there. It started as an argument between two Chinese tongs about a Chinese woman. A white man who tried to intervene was accidentally killed. Because of that, a mob of 500 people rushed the street full of hate. Using the fight as an excuse, they hunted down and shot any Chinese who tried to leave their house or business. And it didn't matter that they had nothing to do with the shooting. Chinese buildings were looted and riddled with bullets. Men, women, and children were dragged out of their homes, trampled by the mob, beaten and hung by their necks. A highly respected Chinese doctor, Dr. Jean Tong, begged in both English and Spanish for his life, offering money and the diamond ring on his finger. But he was given no mercy. The mob stole his money, shot him in the mouth, and chopped off his finger to steal his ring. And that is before they hanged him from a noose. They grabbed a frightened young boy, only 12 years old, who'd only been in the country for a month and who didn't know a word of English. He was hanged. In the end, 19 Chinese Americans were tortured and murdered. But of the 500 vigilantes, only 7 were convicted, but their convictions were overturned, and only 1 served any jail time at all. In fact, some celebrated the violence. One man who, after the violence was done, and with blood on his hands and shirt, joined the festivities in a bar and said, "Well, I'm satisfied now. I've killed 3 Chinamen." This shocking massacre reflected the fact that the Chinese were the scapegoats for the nation's economic problems. And it's sadly something that we are seeing the echoes of today. Since the start of the coronavirus, misinformation, xenophobia, have all led to people blaming Asian Americans for the virus and the economic pain that followed. As a result, there have been over 9,000 anti-Asian hate crimes and incidents since last March, a year and a half ago alone. But unlike in 1871, we are not standing alone. Now, we've been fighting against this anti-Asian hate for a year and a half now from Washington, D.C. But I am so proud that President Biden, in his first week in office, made it a priority to address the rising anti-Asian violence. And I will never forget standing behind him in the White House as he signed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act into law to help improve our hate crimes response. Still, this anniversary is an important reminder about the power of xenophobia to inspire entire communities to ignore the humanity of their neighbors. Today's vigil is a reminder about the sacrifices that those 19 Chinese Americans made. But it's also a reminder that we must use our voices to be vigilant about stereotyping, scapegoating, and unchecked bigotry. We must use our voices to ensure that our civil rights are protected. We must work with other fair-minded Americans to make sure that everybody, no matter what their backgrounds, are not bullied or tortured for being who they are. Today, let us be reminded that we must never let this happen again.
Congress Judy Chu. I would now like to introduce Gay Yuan. Gay Yuan is the chairperson of the Chinese American Museum Board of Directors and UCLA alumni. She is also a newly appointed commissioner to the Los Angeles County Human Relations Commission. Please welcome Gay Yuan.
Thank you so much. Welcome. I'm here to greet everyone to our home away from home, the Chinese American Museum. And in looking at the audience today, it's like Oh Home Week. I know that Morgan and Helen Chu was hanging out at our house all the time when I was an undergrad at UCLA, and we had a lot of fun together. I know that, Judy and Mike in those days also hung out. So our apartment was like a pretty fun place to be during those days. I greet you today on behalf of the board of the Friends of the Chinese American Museum. Today's program kicks off 8 days of programming in commemoration of the 150th anniversary of the Chinese Massacre of 1871. While we're here focusing on a heinous event in LA, let us use this opportunity to tell this story and other stories in days to come as a stimulus to change how our histories in the United States, in this state, and in this city will continue to be told to give accurate representation and accurate descriptions of those of us who were never counted as part of mainstream America. I'm especially thankful to be here talking to Chancellor Block because I grew up a non-English speaking immigrant. I immigrated here at age 6, so I went through the whole school system here, and I was actually slapped for not being able to speak English. And so what that resulted was a self-hating, embarrassed immigrant who felt very strange and very unwelcome. It wasn't until UCLA, and I'm dating myself now, but I was at UCLA 50 or so years ago. And it wasn't at UCLA, blessed to be in those years, where I majored in Chinese studies, relearned my language, relearned my history, and realized that I can be a proud Chinese. Added to that, talk about being in the right place at the right time. With Warren Furatani, with Congresswoman Judy Chu, I took my first Asian American Studies course. And I also took my first Asian American Women's Studies course. And I knew at that time that I'm also a proud American. So I stand before you today very secure in the fact that I am a Chinese American woman. And as such, I welcome you all to the Chinese American Museum. We have board members here. We have an amazing staff who's put together 8 days of programming to commemorate this horrendous part of our local history. I want to thank UCLA. I want to thank Scripps College of Music especially, and special thank you to Hao Huang. He came to us 2 years ago with this vision and dream of his to say, I want to tell this story. I want to tell it in such a way that's different from any other way. And we were so proud that he chose us, the Chinese American Museum, to introduce and premiere his art. And so we welcome him back today. And so, having said that, we are also very fortunate to be placed in City Council District 14, where we are represented by Council Member Kevin De Leon, and I'd like to bring him up now.
Gay, thank you so very much for your very powerful words. Chancellor Jean Block, Jean, thank you so very much for your incredible leadership, not just in Los Angeles, but being at the helm of the greatest public university in the land, if not the entire world. We thank you very much for what you do for everyday Angelenos, Californians, and Americans. To our Congressman Judy Chu, we thank you not just for representing San Gabriel Valley, but for the voice, the role that you play for Asian American women, for women in general, that we as young boys, young girls, young men, and young women can look up to. We thank you for your leadership. To Gay, what can I say? You know, your incredible leadership at the Chinese American Museum, CAM, just not too far from here, maybe 100 yards from here. To be a Chinese immigrant, to suffer the discrimination, the overt racism, to overcome, to be a powerful American, a powerful Californian, a powerful Angeleno is inspirational and motivational to all Angelenos. So we thank you for your leadership, Gay. Thank you so very much. Let me say that, and I think that Judy articulated very eloquently in giving the history of the Chinese American Massacre back in 1871. You know, more than 19 individuals who were dragged to the gallows, makeshift gallows, and they were hung, making this the largest mass lynching in the history of the United States of America. The great diaspora of the Guangzhou region, of the Canton region to the United States, especially during that gold rush, the Chinese Americans, the Chinese immigrants who helped fortify and build that transcontinental railroad that created the wealth and made California the 5th largest economy on planet Earth. It was these men and women who put their lives on the line that created the greatest state in the history of humankind, the great state of California. But as we know also too, one of the very little known histories is the 1871 massacre, where again, these men and this young child of only 12 years of age was brought forth, or dragged, I should say, because of because of a feud that was happening, but the white vigilante mob took it upon themselves to dispel a grotesque form of justice. Now, this history is very little known, and that's why it is important that we understand and know our history. The very fact that Chinatown originally was this area to my left and Union Station, because Chinatown, where it stands today, is not the Chinatown that we know back in the day. That is not the original Chinatown. And once again, they were forcibly removed from their territory, from their land, and forcibly moved to another part of the city of LA. Because we are standing at El Pueblo, which is the birthplace of the greatest city in America, the city of Los Angeles. Yes, let's give it up. And as was mentioned a few moments ago, Judy had mentioned the massacre of 1871, and was mentioned too, the Chinese Exclusion Act that was promulgated originally in our own very state capital, up in Sacramento, on the green carpet that Judy used to serve on, as well as I, and on the red carpet where I served as the first Latino Asian in the history of the state of California to be the president of your California State Senate, first person of color in more than 130 years. We passed the laws that prohibited legally Chinese from marrying whites, from acquiring land, property, from even fishing in our own rivers. And as a result, we had a congressman from Placerville who took it upon himself to nationalize the Chinese Exclusion Act in Washington, D.C. And then, as was mentioned, Executive Order 9066 for our Japanese brothers and sisters who were forcibly removed from their neighborhoods, such as Boyle Heights, and taken to internment camps, not just in California, but throughout the country. This is a sordid history of our nation, marginalizing, subjugating our most vulnerable citizens. But as a result of the phoenix rising from the ashes, we have the largest Chinese American community outside of the Republic of China, in our very own state, the state of California. And as a result, we have professionals, we have academics, we have elected officials at the highest levels. We have entrepreneurs, we have innovators, we have everyday folks who cook, prepare meals for us. They are part of the beautiful mosaic, that beautiful diversity, that tapestry of so many different ethnic hues, ethnicities, hues, regardless of who you are, and regardless of where you come from, regardless of the color of your skin, which God you pray to, who you love, and yes, your legal status. Because regardless of who we are and where we come from, we have proven time and time again that we will always demand that every human being deserves a dignity, a modicum of dignity and respect. So I thank you for bringing us together, and for the musicians from Scripps College. I also took classes at Scripps College, although it's an all women's college. They allow folks to take classes there, and also too, as just a recent member of the faculty at the Luskin School of Innovation, at the Luskin School of Public Affairs, at the greatest public university in the world, UCLA. It is timely that we have all come together. So from the bottom of my heart, to each and every one of you, I want to thank you as we commemorate, recognize this atrocity. In the next 8 days, all the main events will be taking place as we culminate next week on the 24th, right here at the Chinese American Museum. We will rise, voices will rise until every Californian, every American recognizes this atrocity. Thank you so very much. Xie xie.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce the General Manager of El Pueblo. And for those of you who haven't hung around here. This is the essence of who we are as a city. We have the Chinese American Museum over there. We have the Italian American Museum over there. We have all the historical buildings of those who came as the first people who settled Los Angeles. And Arturo is here as the general manager, and he's just been wonderful to work with. So Arturo, will you come up and speak a few words?
Thank you, Gay. Thank you, all people present here today. I really would like to welcome you to Pueblo historical monument. We represent about 22 acres, and as Gay says, we do have several museums. That is on top of the Chinese American. This is the home of the Chinese American Museum. But more importantly, I want to welcome and thank you for attending. Chancellor Block, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your words and your commentary, and of course, one of the best and the most promising public school university in the country. Okay, and my brothers are graduates, so really, it's close to our heart in our family. Congresswoman Judy Chu, long-standing, very well to recognize you, and to your frequent visitor here at Chinese American Museum, as well as through your district, and as well as good friends with Gay and everyone here at the Chinese American Museum. Thank you so much for being here. Gay, we've already said much to you. The Friends of Chinese American Museum, without your leadership, we wouldn't be where we're at. And we appreciate all the work that you've been doing, along with your staff and along with the Chinese American Museum staff members. This is a great time for us to be able to do these things that we're doing here at Pueblo, and we thank you so much for all your work and your efforts. Council member, Senator, Assembly member, Kevin De Leon, thank you so much. Representing the 14th District, quite a challenge, and yet he's been able to rise to that challenge and done quite a great job with his short period of time here on the council. Thank you so much. Also, we'd like to welcome the Asian American Studies Center from UCLA Asia Pacific Center, and also the Scripps, as been mentioned by everyone here today. I think it's important that we understand, and everybody's already mentioned the historic and the horrific incident that happened 150 years ago. And I also want to let you know that as we stand here in the kiosk on the birthplace of the city of Los Angeles, and are surrounded by monuments of different natures, I think it's very important that with the leadership of the Friends of Chinese American Museum, as well as the City of Los Angeles, with Mayor Eric Garcetti and Christopher Hawthorne, who was able to push with his report on past due, the Chief Design Officer for the City of Los Angeles, and mentioning and actually bringing to fruition, to the limelight, the actual events that occurred here throughout the City of Los Angeles. I think that we should thank the mayor, as well as Christopher Hawthorne and the groups that has been put together in order to bring together an appropriate monument for the 1871 massacre of Chinese here in the U.S. It is a horrific area. It is horrific history that we have here. It is a horrific situation that have occurred. And most of our monuments throughout the country, and especially here and everywhere else, are always noted for bringing up the state, for commemorating events that happen in a good light, making people proud of the events that have occurred. But I think that there's been a change in the country where we are actually questioning the type of monuments that we have and the types of work that we do with regard to the type of monuments, the recognition of individuals and people that have been recognized throughout history. And I think that the monument, the commemoration, brings to light not only what has happened, but we need to start recognizing the good and the bad and the ugly, that formation of this country. And having the monument that's currently in process take place here where it occurred, and in the city of Los Angeles, which is the impact throughout the country, is important for us. It's important for us because as the city goes, so does the country. And it's time that we have a recognize moment of what has happened in history and how people have persevered, how people have gone and been resilient, and how, as the council member indicated, not only did they try to wipe some folks out here, Chinese Americans, but now we're all here and we're not going anywhere. And we have been successful. We've been successful in all these ethnic countries coming together, and the unity that's come together is very important to us. So I really applaud the fact that we're able to put together such a great group of folks led by this collaboration of individuals from the city of Los Angeles and other folks in order to actually mount an actual commemoration that we recognize what has occurred and also give honor to those folks that passed during this horrific event in 1871. Thank you very much for your attention.
Afternoon. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the UCLA Chinese Music Ensemble for their exquisite performance. They're led by Professor Chi Li, and their music is a way not only to celebrate, to commemorate the Chinese people, but also to honor Chinese culture. And I thought that was an appropriate thing to begin with. I'd also like to introduce the performers of this event. We'll start with the musicians, composer and scriptwriter, and guitarist and singer, Hao Huang. Singer and keyboardist, Emma Guise. Synthesizer and electronic piano players, Chi-Wei Lo and Xiaopei Xu. And also my co-narrator, Curtis Wang. And also our body movement artist, YT Wong. So thank you so much, and we'll get started now.
Every day, more than 100,000 people pass through LA Union Station.
Oh, nearer, brother, nearer, for my limbs are growing cold, and thy presence seemeth nearer when thine arms around me fold. I am dying, brother, dying. Soon you'll miss me in your birth. My farm will soon be lying 'neath the ocean's briny surf. I can hear the darkness speaking. Lord, I know its voice so well. When I'm gone, don't you be weeping. Brother, hear my last farewell.
Every day, more than 100,000 people pass through LA Union Station. Less than a block away, one of the busiest stretches of Highway 101 roars day and night, like a river of fire, metal, and humanity. Tourists from all over the world flock to the El Pueblo de Los Angeles Historical Monument, with its landmarks, museums, and Olvera Street shopping. All the while, beneath their feet lie the remains of Los Angeles' original Chinatown, buried under layers of steel-girded concrete and under more than a century of violence, neglect, and enforced obscurity. LA's original Chinatown was razed in the 1930s to make way for the construction of Union Station. However, the Chinese community's forced relocation to present-day Chinatown was neither the worst indignity they suffered, nor the most notorious atrocity. That macabre distinction belongs to the 1871 Los Angeles Chinatown Massacre.
On a clear October evening, 150 years ago, around 20 Chinese men were murdered here in old Chinatown by a lynch mob 500 strong. It was the worst mass lynching ever to occur in California and one of the worst in American history. How did this atrocity come to pass? Why has it been left out of history books and suppressed for so long? In order to answer these questions, we must start with an understanding of the Chinese American experience.
Some 97% of Americans are either descended from immigrants or are immigrants themselves. Like all of our immigrant communities, Chinese Americans are stunningly diverse, hailing from a wide range of ethnic, linguistic, cultural, and historical backgrounds. Our stories include harrowing refugee dramas, soap opera success stories, and 5 million things in between. For this reason, there is no single Chinese American experience, only the experiences of individual Chinese American people. It is only from the outside that stereotypes and group characteristics are projected onto us. We are often cast as perpetual outsiders, condemned to otherness and foreignness in our own land by the specter of race. But what is race really? Invented by European colonizers to justify their exploitation of other cultures and people, it is now a scourge on our collective consciousness, which leads our fellow Americans to ask us, so what are you? When it is who we are that really matters.
As I struggle to stand on the edge of the end, I can see by your hesitation that you love to pretend. It betrays you, though you nod your head. When I ask you if your dreams are dead. When I came to this land, I was hardly a man. Empty pockets and empty promises were all that I had. But the amaretto eyelids that I got from my dad, yes, I guess I'll always have those too. And without them, I look just like you. So God bless the child of American soil. In the days of our decline, as if there was another time before it all went wrong, when home's not so hard to find. So bury my hopes in the Rocky Mountain high. Bury my shame at Wounded Knee. Scatter my dreams in the California sun. Scatter my ashes over the sea. And God bless the child of American soil. In the days of our decline, as if there was another time before it all went wrong, when home was not so hard to find.
The residents of LA Chinatown in 1871 came to America with little wealth and few connections or plans. Most were refugees displaced by a series of catastrophic events which struck South China in the 19th century. At that time, South China was home to a number of peoples who were often in conflict with each other, European colonizers, and imperial forces from the north. In the 1850s, these stresses gave rise to a full-blown rebellion against Beijing and its European confederates. The war lasted for 14 years and claimed more than 20 million lives, a human cost comparable to World War I. It was called the Taiping Rebellion, the war for heavenly peace. These crises in China coincided with an explosion in demand for cheap labor in California. Slavery had been officially abolished in 1865, but companies and private citizens alike continued to recruit Chinese refugees to do their dirty tasks, often at starvation wages. These workers lived under unspeakably poor conditions and performed tasks ranging from cooking and cleaning to literally moving mountains for the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. The Chinese were persecuted and abused. As in the case of indigenous American tribes, Chinese were banned from testifying against white and Mexican Americans in court. There were 100 men, women, and children living in LA, Chinatown, at the time of the massacre. A little under 2% of the city's entire population. After enduring the horrors of war, famine, and exile, the Chinese in LA once again found themselves under a hostile and oppressive regime. They endured the constant indignity and abuse as best they could, perhaps realizing that if a single one of them cracked under the strain and decided to fight back, the whole community would pay for it in gold and blood.
A dream today, now that you have gone to stay. Innocence in a sun-kissed bower, swept away like a springtime flower. Late nights all alone, what they tell me anyway. All that was green has now gone gray. But I will be with you, my friend, in your darkest hour, in your darkest hour. I won't, heart of mine, make you wait or waste your time, no matter what you're looking for. I expect nothing anymore, so don't go look for me down beneath the apple tree, standing naked against the night, dead and withering out of sight. But I will be with you, my friend, in your darkest hour, in your darkest hour. Yes, I will be with you again in your darkest hour, in your darkest hour, in your darkest hour.
Anti-Chinese sentiment ran especially high in 1871 California. As with more recent waves of migrant laborers and refugees, there was a vocal and violent backlash against the new arrivals. The worst episode was the 1871 LA Chinatown Massacre. But there are many stories about it, and we don't know actually what exactly happened. So we're going to tell you one version of what happened. The massacre may never have happened if not for the actions of an LA policeman named Jesus Bilderand and an erstwhile saloon owner named Robert Thompson. In 1824, in 1871, October 24th, Bilderand and Thompson attempted to steal a large quantity of gold from a Chinatown storekeeper turned gangster named Sam Yuan. How they found out about it is a wild tale of intrigue, love, and jealousy. The whole thing revolved around a young woman named Yat Ho. It was unusual for a Chinese immigrant to have so much gold. Bilderand and Thompson thought it was theirs for the taking, but Sam Yuan wasn't giving it up without a fight. There was a showdown at the Cornell Adobe, located on the corner of Los Angeles and Arcadia Streets, right over there. Bilderand and Thompson shot first, but Sam Yuan shot straighter. He hit Bilderand in the shoulder and Thompson in the chest. Thompson died an hour later. Minutes after Thompson's death, a mob assembled in front of the Cornell. Sam Yuan himself fought his way out, along with his gang and his precious chest of gold. The mob made little attempt to stop armed men. Instead, they laid siege to the building, which was home to a number of Chinese families. The mob killed and wounded several unarmed Chinese people who tried to escape. Eventually, the rioters smashed their way inside, looting and killing as they went. They set fire to several other buildings nearby, rousting their Chinese occupants out of bed and marching them through the streets with nooses around their necks. A local Chinese doctor, well known for treating patients of all nationalities, was one of their victims. Others were waylaid on the street on their way home from work. One of those was a well-known musician. Another had been in America for only 1 week. He was just a boy. None of the victims was involved in the shooting of Robert Thompson. Most of them didn't even know about it. What drove those 500 men to attack the people of Chinatown with such hatred? Was it the anti-Chinese rhetoric in the media of the day that blinded them to their victims' humanity? Or perhaps, like present-day white supremacists who turned to violence, they simply thought they could get away with it. One thing is for certain. The specter of race and racism casts its shadow over the whole affair. For a Chinese man to kill a white man, even in self-defense, was an unacceptable challenge to the social order. When contemplating the horror and heartbreak experienced by the victims and their loved ones, it's important not to reduce the whole thing to a cautionary tale. These people were human beings, real persons, like you and me. This is our opportunity to look within and to reach out to these people in our hearts. Across the 150 years between our time and theirs, we can empathize with their experience in the primal core of our humanity, in the tingling rush from which both terror and courage arise, in the paradox of death, so certain, and yet so mysterious. And perhaps, most of all, in our capacity to be moved by compassion and grief.
When I stared into the darkness, I was certain that I saw your ghost. In the minutes before moonrise, in the time I think about you most. And though it wouldn't be the first time that my senses made a fool of me, I can still recall the words your phantom lips unmoving seemed to say. You said, oh, famished heart, now that we're worlds apart, don't you be afraid that sounds of life will fade. Come speak to me. What can I still believe? What can the dead tell me to heal my grief? When you listen to the silence, it reminds you that you're not alone. Every moment of your life, or when the earth has swallowed up your bones. And I can't exactly hear you, don't exactly know you long for me. 'Cause it's true that I'm still with you, though I'm not the way I used to be. And I said, please, please don't go. Will we ever meet again, or are you really gone? I need to know. But it wasn't with your voice that you replied, no, was it with mine own? When you listen to the silence, it reminds you that you're not alone.
After the massacre, several arrests were made. But the combination of racism and legal technicalities resulted in all the cases being thrown out of court. The killers all walked free. And within days, the pawn shops of LA were flooded with the spoils of Chinatown. Justice was never served. But what is justice? Do two wrongs make a right? What about 20? Justice is what happens when someone chooses to do right by someone else instead of putting them down. This is true regardless of race, nationality, or any of the other specters which ignite our rage and obscure our view. When those things win out, we forget to do right by others, and we commit acts of hate, of violence. That was what happened in the hearts of those 500 men in the lynch mob 150 years ago. And it still happens in the hearts of millions every day.
I'm in trouble with my words again. I can't say anything for certain. If you don't feel better soon, you won't mind the world forgetting you. If
If I thought you would believe it, I'd gladly give away the secret why the dead must sleep so long, and why the right thing still feels wrong. We see by the light of the shadow, and we cannot lie to the shadow. I don't know if it's a sickness or if our beauty is our weakness. Why, if we must fear the night, do you look so good by dying light? Bright as mountains full of fire, fierce and hungry as desire, swifter than the roving eye. No truth can't seem to satisfy, and the only way we can make things right is to lose ourselves in a losing fight, for we belong to the shadow, and we can't belong to the shadow.
We are gathered here today to remember the victims of the 1871 LA Chinatown Massacre. Not only their deaths, but also their lives. From the good doctor who learned English and Spanish so he could care for his neighbors, to the musician, the teenager, and all the other cooks, cigar makers, laundrymen, and dry goods sellers who traveled across the world to make lives for themselves in this wild, dangerous town 150 years ago. We should also remember the others, the ones who escaped the lynch mob. The gunslinger Samuel and the woman Yat Ho, the woman at the center. If you tune in to the podcast Blood on Gold Mountain, you'll get to hear their stories. For the living, remembering old Chinatown and the 1871 massacre is a crucial step on the path of creating a Los Angeles where people of all backgrounds can look at each other in the eye and see each other for what they are, equals, each with a unique, compelling perspective and story. However, remembering is more than a simple social justice imperative. It is also the way in which we get to experience the complexity of our shared language and our shared heritage. For all its painful truths and hard-won lessons, this history is our history. By facing it and accepting it, we are learning to face and accept the world together and ourselves for what and who we are.
If I say the truth like I want to do, if I say the truth, who will know? Will you? What is hard as stone? What are broken bones? Where do I belong? Where do you know? With her hair you gone, what am I to do? Am I all alone? Are you? Do you listen to yourself, my friend? Does it make a difference in the end? Life is but a dream, so you say, and I know what you mean. Only what I know is real to me. You may ask for more, but is that what you're really longing for? This is strange. Have we been here before? The strangest feeling as if the world was ending, my friend, as if no one cared.
Thank you, Professor Huang and the Chinese elegy. Our colleague at UCLA, Michelle Caswell, offers us a term called corollary moments. She says that a corollary moment is a point in time that has historic precedence. What we see today reminds us that by remembering the Chinese Massacre, we're able to see the present moment in historical time as part of a longer history. And as we deepen our understanding of this history, we can change the mindsets, structures, and dynamics that lead to the repeated loss and damage of life and liberty we're witnessing today. We hope you'll join us in this fight against racism, for social justice, for racial justice, for all of our humanity. We'd like to thank again all of the organizations that made today possible. And we'd like to remind you that this Friday, UCLA, our centers together, will have a scholars panel featuring Eugene Moy from the Chinese American Museum and the Chinese Historical Society of Southern California, Professor Hiroshi Motomura from the law school to give a history on the anti-exclusionary legislation in the US, and Hao Huang to talk a little bit more about the Chinese Massacre itself. We'd also like to just remind you of CAM's week of events, and all of this information is on our website. So thank you very much again, and let me hand it over to Min.
Thank you, Karen. Let's end with Mandarin. 多谢大家光临我们今天的活动。我们纪念150年前洛杉矶华人大屠杀的死难同胞，同时也不忘今天新冠疫情当下，我们的社区和同胞还继续遭受着仇亚种族歧视的言论和行为的困扰，所以我们要齐心合力，坚决不允许历史重演，反对种族歧视，为争取种族平等、社会公平和社会正义而不断的努力。我们今天的纪念活动还包括下个星期五10月22日中午我们的一场线上学术研讨会。研讨会的学者有 Scripps College 的黄浩教授，就是刚才的 narrator， 还有南加州华人历史学会的 Eugene Moy 老师，以及 UCLA 法学院的 Motomura 教授。欢迎大家连线参加，希望大家多多保重，身体健康。再见，谢谢。Thank you and goodbye.